I used to wake up first. The apartment had two kinds of quiet: the night quiet that held the city at arm's length, and the morning quiet that smelled like fresh coffee and laundry powder. He slept heavily, one arm flung over his head as if claiming the ceiling. I would tiptoe to the kitchen, fill the kettle, and line up two mugs on the counter. One had a faint chip on the rim that he refused to throw away. He said it gave the cup character. I loved that about him, or thought I did. The way he noticed small imperfections and treated them like personality rather than flaw. We had our routines. He took the dog out before work while I packed both our lunches, pretending we were still saving for something even though we had stopped talking about big plans. At night, we watched old crime shows and argued about plot holes, then fell asleep with the window cracked open to let the city air in. He hummed when he brushed his teeth, a tuneless sound that used to make me laugh. He always forgot where he put his wallet. I always found it. We were boring in a way that felt earned. We were steady. That's what I told our friends when they asked how married life was: steady, like a well-made table that doesn't wobble when you lean on it. He started spending more time on his phone around winter. He said everyone at work was doing short-form videos for marketing, that it was good to understand how trends moved. He would scroll while I stirred soup or folded towels, and sometimes he'd say, "Hold on," when I asked something simple, like whether he'd seen my keys. He had always liked tech more than me. I preferred handwriting, lists, notes to myself in the margins of recipe books. He liked apps that did the same thing but beeped. I thought it was harmless. There were hints, of course, but they were so small I could pretend they were nothing. He bought a ring light. He said the lighting in our living room was terrible. He started using my concealer sometimes, just a little, dabbed around his eyes. I looked dead on camera, he joked. He followed it with a kiss against my temple, light and practiced. As if love were a routine we were keeping fit. I smiled back because that's what you do when your life feels mostly fine. On Thursdays he had game nights with friends, a ritual older than our marriage. I liked those evenings. The apartment belonged to me then. I would take a bath long enough to turn my fingers soft. I would cut fruit into perfect squares and eat it from a bowl like a spoiled cat. He always texted goodnight from the rideshare on his way home. Once I asked for a photo, half teasing, half flirting, the kind of small, harmless request couples make to feel close. He sent a selfie with too perfect lighting for the inside of a car, the background strangely still. I let it go. I told myself cars had better lighting now. I told myself I was tired. The accident with the borrowed hoodie was what opened the first real crack. I found it at the back of the closet under his winter jackets, not mine. Navy blue with a logo I didn't recognize. The cuffs smelled of someone else's laundry detergent. Sharp and floral. He said a coworker had left it at the gym. He said the coworker moved to another city and didn't want it back. He said a lot of things quickly, with a forward-tilting voice that made me want to put a hand on his shoulder and tell him to slow down. But I didn't. I folded the hoodie. I put it back. When I finally looked, it was by accident. I was looking for a recipe I had saved in my notes, and I opened the wrong app. A splash of neon text, a familiar kitchen counter. The video was shot at a low angle, and my chipped mug appeared in the corner like a witness. He was speaking in the bright, authoritative voice I had heard him use in work meetings when he presented. 3 lies that will save your relationship, he said, smiling at the camera with his eyes too alert. 1. Always save a decoy chat with a friend. 2. Never keep the same routine. 3. Learn your partner's tells before they learn yours. It didn't sound like him. It sounded like a character wearing his face. I watched the clip twice to make sure it wasn't a joke I didn't get. I clicked his profile. There were dozens of videos. Fast cuts, bold captions, little tips that slid into each other like cards into sleeves, makeup tricks to hide a hickey, how to set your phone to auto-delete messages on a schedule, how to explain away credit card charges. There were jokes too, the kind that let you say something awful safely. He laughed at himself while he demonstrated a fake alibi. He winked at the camera. The comments were full of laughter and flames and the kind of admiration that makes you want to cover your face. There were people tagging each other, people asking for specific scenarios. There were requests. He replied to them kindly. He was helpful. I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher. The tile felt cold through my leggings. The dog came over and rested her chin on my knee because that's what she did when I was still for too long. I watched him teach strangers how to break the trust of people like me without leaving bruises. He had filmed most of the videos here, in our home, the place we had painted together while eating takeout on the windowsill. I recognized the brass bowl my sister had given us, the edge of our plant with a battery-operated light tucked in the leaves. It was all there, turned into a set. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but something inside me went very quiet and organized. It made a list. It labeled things by certainty. It did not panic. I stood up, put the kettle on, and made tea, when the water poured into the mug. My hands did not shake. I put the phone face down on the counter and stared at the pulsing notification light as if it could explain anything. It couldn't. When he came home that evening, he wrapped me in a hug from behind, a practiced move that used to make me feel collected. "You smell good," he said against my hair. Like oranges. I had used the same body wash for years. I smiled because that was the shape my face knew how to make. I could feel the glow of his phone against my hip where it pressed in his pocket. He pulled away and asked what we should watch. I said anything was fine. He fell asleep on the couch during the second episode, his mouth open slightly the way it did when he was really out. I watched him sleep and tried to map this man onto the man in the videos. He looked softer when he slept. The lines near his eyes deepened in a familiar way. I felt a small, petty anger at how ordinary he looked. If he had been a stranger with ice blue eyes and a predator's smile, this would have made more sense. But he looked like the man who forgot his wallet and ate cereal out of a mixing bowl when he couldn't find the clean ones. I learned the mechanics of what he did before I asked the why. I made another list, this time with columns. In the first column, videos, dates, topics. In the second, our life on those dates. Did he post before dinner, after I went to bed, on the days he said he was with friends? I took screenshots in a folder with a harmless name, the same way he taught people to hide things. I searched comments for any hint of a specific person. The account was big enough that individuals blurred together. He had built an audience on Betrayal, as if it were a hobby. That was the part one kept circling, the scale of it. This wasn't a single lie that had slipped out and grown legs. It was a garden he watered daily. His phone routine shifted after that. He added a lock within the lock. He kept the camera lens wiped. He filmed when I was in the shower, the fan humming like a barrier. He started calling the videos skits, and the word lodged like a seed in my ear. Skits are harmless. Skits are performance. Skits aren't real. Except his tips were precise and the comments were full of real people following them. One evening in early spring, he came home with a bouquet of lilies. Even though lilies gave me headaches, he set them in the brass bowl like a crown. "We should go somewhere," he said too brightly. "Weekend trip." "Reset." He said reset the way people say detox when they're not talking about juice. I asked him where, and he said, "I don't know, somewhere with water." It sounded like a line. I looked at the lilies and thought about how their pollen stains everything it touches. I didn't accuse him. I didn't storm or break anything. I moved carefully. The way you move when a glass is cracked and heavy with orange juice, not to save the glass, but to save the floor. I started going to bed a little later. I started leaving him alone in rooms with cameras and closed doors. I wanted to see what he was when I was not watching. It felt cruel and necessary. The dog followed me in back, confused, as if I had lost something in the hallway and kept returning for it. Maybe I had. He began to emphasize loyalty in his videos, how to show it by never getting caught. That was his thesis, repeated in variations. If your partner doesn't know, the love is safe. If no one gets hurt, who cares about the truth? He used the word protect to mean deceive, and it made my teeth ache. He said it with such confidence that I could hear his followers repeating it to themselves like a spell that cleanses guilt. It sounded like permission for anything. The night I found the messages, I had not been looking for them. I was looking for a recipe link again, because habit is both comfort and trap. An alert flashed from an app I didn't recognize. The name was a string of vowels and numbers. The preview was half a sentence. "She thinks I'm at game night lol." I stood in the hallway and felt the apartment tilt slightly, as if the building were a boat and a wave had passed under us. I put the phone down on the console table and took 3 breaths. The good slow kind that fill your ribs. The messages were old enough to have a rhythm. She sent photos, mostly cropped too close to identify the room. He sent jokes, directions, suggestions of time. They weren't in love, they were in collaboration. The kind of collaboration that builds confidence like a wall around your private little garden. I scrolled down to the night of the rideshare selfie. He had sent her the same photo first. "How's this?" he wrote. She sent a laughing emoji and said, "Use this next time." Then she recorded a voice note I couldn't play because I was holding the phone too tightly and my thumb shook over the screen. I could have thrown the phone. I didn't. I took pictures of the messages with my own device, in case he had built an auto-delete that would wipe the chat like a chalkboard. Then I put his phone back exactly where I had found it and washed my hands as if something had gotten on me. The dog nosed the bathroom door open and sat staring while I dried my fingers. Her head tilted left, then right. I touched the space between her eyes where the fur grows softer. "You're fine," I told her. I wasn't talking to the dog. The next day, I put the lilies in the trash. I wore a sweater I hadn't worn in a year because he said the color washed me out. I stood in the mirror and looked as washed out as I wanted. Then I called my sister and asked if I could come by after work. She asked if I was okay in that careful way people keep in their pockets for emergencies. I said yes. She said okay anyway, and we hung up. I packed a small overnight bag and put it in the trunk, under the old umbrella and the picnic blanket we never used. I did not plan a speech. I only planned an ending. In the late afternoon, the light in our apartment moved from the table to the floor like someone had dropped a rectangle of gold and let it slide. I sat in that light and waited for him to come home. When he walked in, his face opened automatically into that grin he wore for people, and then it closed again. He looked at me like he'd forgotten my schedule, like I had caught him out of costume. "I'm going to ask you something," I said. My voice surprised me by sounding warm. "You can lie if you want. It won't change anything." He laughed, a reflex. "That's not a great way to start a conversation." I looked at the chipped mug on the counter. "Who is she?" I asked. He did the extra breath thing. He rubbed his palm against the side seam of his jeans the way he did when he didn't know which story to choose. I watched him flip through options behind his eyes. He landed on "It's just content." "It's a character. You know that." His voice had the texture of reassurance. If voices had fabric, his was fleece. "Which part is content?" I asked. "The account that tells people how to lie to the person they love, or the part where you use the same advice to lie to me?" He blinked. The blink of a man who realizes the room is not arranged the way he left it. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being precise. Everyone exaggerates online." He stepped closer, found the edge of the counter with his fingertips. "People like the fantasy. It's like a magic trick. You show them the secret and they think they can do it too, but it never works." "It worked," I said, and watched the word hit him. I saw the messages. He opened his mouth and closed it. For a second, he looked less like a villain than a boy who had been caught copying answers in class and couldn't decide whether to apologize or argue that the test was unfair. I waited. The kettle clicked in the silence, a noise I had always loved because it promised something warm. "You were snooping," he said finally. "I was living," I said, "in the house where you turned me into a backdrop." That made him angry. It was small at first, a furrow, then he gathered it. "You're overreacting." It was nothing. It isn't like I fell in love with anyone. I never would. I don't know what a person expects to hear in that moment. Maybe we want to hear that if there is no romance, there is no harm. Maybe we want to be told that love is a fence around a garden, and as long as the fence holds, who cares if the rest of the yard burns? He waited for the script that would let him be forgiven without changing. I didn't give it to him. "I'm not staying," I said. I felt the words settle into place like furniture after a move. "I don't want your explanations, and I don't want your tears. This is not a negotiation." He laughed again, but it cracked. "Don't be ridiculous. You're upset. Sleep on it." "I slept on it for a month," I said. "I learned your schedule, your lighting, your captions. I watched you build a church out of betrayal and invite anyone with a phone to pray there. I don't want to live in a house of worship to your cleverness." He reached for my hand, and I stepped back. The movement surprised him. I think he had believed that my love would make a bridge where there was a hole. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you build a bridge and it leads you right back into the fire. "What do you want?" he asked. And even then, the question sounded like a formality, not a real inquiry. He wanted a list. He wanted to be a problem that could be solved with a budget and a sprint and a new piece of software. "I want my life back," I said simply. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. He did both. He followed me to the bedroom, talking, organizing his arguments. He offered therapy in the same voice you would offer dessert. He promised to delete the account, though I knew he had backups and drafts and alternate logins. Safety nets for his safety nets. He said he would go public with an apology video about how he had been wrong. He said he would make money off the apology. He didn't say that part out loud, but I could hear it. I packed what I needed quickly. The good sweater, the notebook on my nightstand, the photo my sister took of us on the first day we moved in, where I looked happy and he looked like he wanted to. I left the wedding album on the shelf because something inside me understood that pictures are maps to places you can't visit anymore. He watched me and ran out of words. He looked like he was waiting for a cue. There wasn't one. At the door, he asked if I hated him. It was a small, strange mercy to tell him the truth. "No," I said. "I don't. I wish I did. Hate is clean. This is just sad." I drove to my sister's apartment with the windows cracked and the radio low. The road felt familiar. The way your childhood street still looks like itself even when the trees are bigger and you're older. When I got there, she opened the door without saying anything. And she didn't say "I told you so," even though she could have. She handed me a glass of water and sat across from me on the couch. Both of us curled into ourselves like parentheses. We watched a terrible cooking show where everything was oversalted. When I finally slept, I dreamed of texting a number and getting no reply. It felt peaceful. Leaving wasn't a single decision but a series. I canceled the joint streaming accounts and opened my own. I told the landlord I would not be renewing the lease. I separated our books into piles, giving him the ones we had bought together, keeping the ones I brought into the marriage like old friends. I logged out of anything shared and changed my passwords. I unfollowed his accounts. He sent me links anyway. He posted a video about accountability in which he talked about private mistakes and the importance of privacy in modern relationships. He never said my name. People will tell you that leaving is the hardest part. It isn't. The hardest part is a Tuesday at 4:30 when you smell laundry powder and think of a chipped mug. The hardest part is the panic that hits you when your phone buzzes and you expect a familiar nonsense message and get a shipping notification instead. The hardest part is that you still love a person who trained himself to treat love like a stage prop, and you have to put that love down the way you put down something heavy when your arms shake. I rented a small place near a park. The first night, I slept with the windows open even though it was cold. The air smelled like wet leaves and someone's cigarette on the sidewalk. I bought a lamp that cast warm light instead of blue. I put a plant on the windowsill and promised it nothing. In the mornings, I walked to a cafe where the barista learned my name on the second day and did not ask me about my life on the third. I started writing lists again, not of evidence but of errands. Buy dish soap, call mom, return library book. The lists felt like scaffolding around a house being fixed after a storm. He texted less after a while. When he did, it was practical at first. About the dog, about bills. Then he drifted into nostalgia. He sent photos of our old living room. Do you remember this night? The pictures were framed the way he framed everything, a little too bright. I didn't answer. I learned silence as a language. It spoke for me without wearing me out. I didn't look at his account again until a friend forwarded a clip with a note that said, "Is this about you?" He had posted a long video. A confession dressed as a brand pivot. He said he was changing his content to focus on building trust now. He listed 6 ways to rebuild after broken promises. He looked earnest. He had shaved. He had moved the camera closer to his face. The comments were full of absolution and advice, and people congratulating him for growth. I closed the video and sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea I had brewed too strong. I thought about how easy it is to make a new story out of the same set of facts. If your audience wants to believe in you, at night sometimes I replayed our quiet moments to check whether they were real. The familiar softness of his snore, the way his fingers flexed while he dreamed, the little half-laugh he made when I mispronounced an unfamiliar word. I didn't find lies in those moments. I found something worse. The truth that good things existed alongside the bad, and that didn't absolve anything. Someone can make you coffee every morning and still sell your trust for content. 2 things can be true. We keep expecting life to pick a side. It rarely does. I saw him once in the park, months later. He was with the dog. She spotted me first and pulled hard enough to skid his shoes on the path. I crouched and let her run into me, her nails clicking against the pavement. She thumped me with her tail, a beating heart of forgiveness. He stood a few feet away, hands jammed in his jacket pockets, watching me with the careful look people use when approaching an animal that might bite. "You look good," he said finally. "I sleep," I said. He nodded like it was a complicated concept. "I miss you." "I miss the person I thought you were," I said. And it wasn't cruel, it was accurate. He looked down at the dog and cleared his throat. When he lifted his head, I saw the old impulse rise. The urge to turn this into a scene that could be filmed, framed, edited for sympathy. I stepped away from it like moving out of the path of a bicycle. "Take care," I said, and I meant it. Not because he deserved my kindness, but because I didn't want to carry the opposite anymore. I kissed the top of the dog's head where the fur smelled like grass and city dust. Then I walked away, my hands in my pockets, the weight of my keys a reminder that doors open for those who hold them. People have asked me since then if I regret not making a bigger disaster. They want spectacle, the kind of story that ends with shattered plates and shouted names. I don't. My ending was small and ordinary, like placing a glass safely in the sink. I took my dignity in both hands and carried it out of a room where it would have been chipped and repaired until it wasn't itself anymore. There is a peace in that I didn't know I could earn. Sometimes, in my new kitchen, the kettle clicks, and for a second, I am back in the old apartment, and his voice is in the next room, cheerful and loud, teaching strangers how to be careful with their lies. Then the sound fades. I pour the water, and the steam rises. I sit by the window, and I make a list. I write small things, oranges, socket covers for the loose outlets, call landlord about the draft. I write one bigger thing sometimes, trust yourself. It isn't poetry. It is a habit like making coffee or walking the dog or opening the window at night. It is a choice I make in the morning and again in the afternoon when I feel small. It is the way I return to myself, not with a victory march, but with the steady, almost boring persistence of a person who knows where she keeps her own wallet. Here's what I know now: love is not a secret to optimize. It is not a problem to hack with better lighting and right angles. It is not content. It is meals and chores and fingers brushing in the grocery store when both of you reach for the same jar. It is telling the truth even when the truth is stupid and unflattering. It is admitting you forgot to pay the electricity bill and not inventing an elaborate story about why. It is not glamorous. It is ordinary, and because of that, it is holy. He will go on, I think, because that is what people do. Maybe he will mean it when he says he is better. Maybe he will monetize the apology and call it growth. I can't live in the space where his choices matter more than mine. I had to leave that room, close that door, and open my own. I am learning the taste of quiet that belongs only to me. It is less sweet than I imagined and much cleaner. When the lilies bloom in late spring on someone else's windowsill, they will leave their orange stains on someone else's hands. I will buy peonies and put them in a vase and watch their heads open slowly, lazily, like they have all the time in the world. I will wash the pollen from my fingers with cheap soap that smells like lemons. I will look at the sun moving across my kitchen floor and think not of loss, but of how light keeps its promises without asking for anything back. I thought the worst part would be what he did. It wasn't. The worst part was realizing I had learned to doubt myself in the small ways that make you smaller. The best part then has been this: trusting the quiet voice that said leave and finding that my life didn't end at the door. It started again, softly. Not with applause, with a cup of tea cooling beside a list on a table that doesn't wobble, in a room where no one is filming me, in a body that remembers what it feels like to belong only to itself.